Thank you for joining the City of Kingston's Common Council at our Finance and Audit meeting. Today is Wednesday, June 10th. My name is Andrea Schott, the Council President and organizer for our virtual meetings. Before we begin, we would like to go over a few guidelines to help us navigate the system as efficiently and respectfully as possible. We ask that members of the public and press remain muted and off camera for the length of the meeting. As organizer, I reserve the right to mute anyone who unmutes themselves. Council members and city staff will control their own mute button. Good practice would be to mute yourself if you are not speaking to avoid background noise and feedback. If a council member or staff wishes to speak, they will raise their hands. The chairperson will call on them before they speak by stating their name clearly for our audio listeners. All of our meetings are recorded. Both video and written transcriptions will be made available to the public on the city's website. Although we will not have public speaking tonight, you could submit written comments to the City of Kingston Clerk, Elisa Tinty, at emtinty@kingston-ny.gov, or by dropping them off at the drop box located outside the side door of City Hall. We also encourage you to reach out to committee chairs or your ward's representative at any time. If you have any audio issues, send a text message to the following number, 594-6120. Be aware that phone calls will not be answered during this meeting. The phone number to text is 845-594-6120. As the organizer for today's meeting, I reserve the right to lock and pause the meeting to eject anyone who has behaved inappropriately. At tonight's meeting, we have in attendance Chairman Alderman Doug Coop, Alderman Don Tollerman, Alderman Rennie Scott Childress, Alderman Steve Shabbat, Alderman Jeffrey Ventura Morel, Alderwoman Rita Worthington, Alderwoman Michelle Hirsch, and Alderman Tony Davis. Thank you for your patience during these difficult times, and on behalf of the Common Council, I wish you and your family good health. I now turn the floor over to Chairman Coop.
Good evening, everyone. We have an agenda with 9 items on it tonight, which includes the controller's update. I'd like to make one change to the agenda. Item number 5 is a discussion with Dan Baker on tax proceedings, for which we will be going into executive session. So I'd like to move, without objection, I'd like to move that to the end of the meeting so that we don't split the agenda with an executive session. Everyone all right with that? Okay, thank you. Okay, first item on the agenda is the Parks Capital Project from the Recreation Trust Fund, and I thought the mayor might be speaking to that, but he hasn't joined us yet. John, is he going to speak to us on that? Should we defer this to he joins us?
Hey, Doug, I'm here.
Oh, you're here? Oh, okay. Good evening. Okay. Steve, this is to authorize the mayor to expend up to $314,500 from the recreation fee reserve for the a whole listing of parks and recreation projects. You want to speak to this, please?
Sure. Yeah, I would be happy to. Thank you all for the opportunity tonight. Many of you may remember Kevin Gilfeather and I coming to you all last spring to have a conversation about making some much needed improvements to some of our parks. Unfortunately, most of those projects didn't move forward in 2019 for a variety of reasons. And so we're here tonight to be able to ask for an allocation of just over $300,000 out of the Recreation Trust Fund. This includes some projects from last year that were not completed and some new projects for this year that we would like to complete. I know it may sound, it's kind of out of what we've been used to over the last few weeks anyway, when we're dealing with our finances. It's been about where we can save money and cut spending. And here I am asking for over $300,000 to spend funds. And I want to just explain why. First, the funds that go into the Recreation Trust Fund are put in there by housing developers as part of the development process. They have to make a certain deposit into the Recreation Trust Fund. That funding can only be used for recreation capital projects to be able to improve our park facilities. And with that fund, the funds have to be allocated each year. So for any funds that, for instance, we don't spend, it goes back into the trust fund and then needs to be reallocated by the Common Council in a future time period. And so with the COVID-19 pandemic and with the number of recreation programs that we've had to curtail or cancel, and with the limited amount of usage of many of our parks, we're still unable to use basketball courts or use playgrounds. It really has reduced the amount of usage, which has been really great for our parks maintenance staff to be able to get into our parks and to make some much needed improvements. But as you could imagine, through that work, we've actually very quickly spent down a lot of our maintenance lines already because of that. And our park staff are really interested in getting some more work done. And so the list that we've come up with has been in consultation with the Parks and Recreation Department and the Department of Public Works. And so I want to just go over quickly the list, and I'll go through them. If you have questions, please stop me, and I'll try to answer them to the best that I can. The first one is we have $25,000 for the construction of a new roof at the Hasbrook Park Pavilion. It basically needs new shingles and new underboards in certain areas where it's rotted through. That would be done both with to be able to replace that roof this year. There's $50,000 for the full reconstruction at the Hutton Park Pavilion. We've looked at both the roof, which needs repair, but also the pillars holding up the roof also needs repair. And so we basically would be starting from scratch with that pavilion. And so our cost estimates for that are around $50,000. We also have identified that Lauren Park has some really outdated and unusable playground equipment. There are whole sections of the playground that are missing and that have been removed because they broke, but unfortunately they don't sell the parts to fix them. And so we really do need to replace sections of that, not all of it, but sections of that, as well as do some crack repair at the tennis courts that are there. There are some relatively major, almost 2-inch size cracks in the courts. And if we don't repair those cracks, they will continue to get worse. And so that's approximately $50,000 for those two items. We also, as we mentioned last year and during my State of the City address again this year, we are looking forward to moving the skate park concept forward. So we're requesting $50,000 to pour a new concrete slab, as well as add at least 2 park elements. And this would be located at the former tennis courts that used to be at Hasbrook Park. They've since been abandoned, and it is just kind of now a black-topped, if you'll call it that, area that's still fenced in. And so that's the area where we would pour the concrete and put the elements. Moving on further down into McConkey, the Raquel Knox Memorial Playground met its life expectancy last year, and so it had to be removed, and it has since been removed. And so this is an effort to be able to replace that playground equipment, to move the playground a little bit further from a retaining wall that is quite tall, and out of the safety of our users, we want to kind of move the playground away from that retaining wall, as well as put in some new signage and remove some of the dead trees. And so that's approximately $70,000. We do want to continue the work that we're doing with Wi-Fi and providing internet to our parks. That will also provide the opportunity to include some additional security at the parks. And so we would expand to the other 7 major parks that currently don't have Wi-Fi. Currently, Beat Stadium, Forsyth Park are really the only complexes right now that have it. And we also would include some additional funds for Barman Park. You'll see on the agenda a little bit later tonight, there'll be a budget transfer request to do some CDBG funds to be spent to replace the playground and to add new components to the playground. And this would allow for the edge of the park, adjacent to the Metro building, to have a very old fence and tree line cleared and removed and replaced with something that works and looks a whole lot nicer for the neighborhood, and really would add to the overall Barman Park improvements. And so with all of that, we believe that, we can get that done. Most of that work is going to be managed by Julie Noble, who's the project manager, who does all of our capital projects for parks and recreation. And so if you have questions specifically, either I can answer those or we can pitch some of those to Julie, who I think is also on the call.
Okay, thank you, Steve. First is Rennie, then Steve Shabbat, then Jeffrey.
Right. Steve, so since this is a Recreation Department project, right? It's from the Recreation Trust Fund. Why won't Lindsay Timbrook be in charge of these projects?
Well, Lindsay's the director of recreation. And so DPW and Parks and Recreation are working collaboratively, on these projects. And for all of these projects, we have project managers in each department that manage projects. And so usually, we assign projects based on availability of staff. And in this case, the Parks and Recreation Department is going to collaboratively manage these with DPW. Because as you know, DPW has been given, the role of capital management and facility management in all of our parks.
So this sounds like it's kind of confusing as to who's actually going to be ultimately responsible. So is it going to be Ed Norman then? So
with each of these projects, it is again a combination. Ed and DPW has been given the responsibility of managing all of our maintenance of our facilities, and also is managing the capital projects. However, you need Parks and Recreation's input and also management when it comes to picking out playgrounds, helping to design where those sites go. And that does take some knowledge of recreation. And so, again, as we've talked about, this is a collaborative effort between the two departments.
Great. So if we have questions, which of those people do we go to?
Well, you can go to both.
It sounds like three. It's Ed, Julie, and Lindsay.
Yeah. And so, as you know, every single project that we have in the city, and I think that at the last meeting, you guys, at the last finance meeting, I think Kristen Wilson went over the grants activity sheet. And so for every single project in the city, it's assigned a project manager. And so if you look at that, you'll see in every department, most department heads are not project managers. They have lots of other things that they need to worry about. In the end, project managers have these staff report to them, but project managers are necessary to be able to do the daily work. So I'd encourage you to look at that and see that, and that happens across the city and a variety of departments. And that also is how we get work done currently in DPW and Parks and Rec. We manage lots and lots of projects, and we need project managers to do that.
So you have no problem with us speaking directly to those three folks on any of these projects?
No, I think the best plan is for you to speak to me in my office, and then I'll get you the information and questions that you have.
That sounds like a shift in previous policy.
Actually, that's what the charter says. So I'd encourage you to read the charter in the section where it talks about the common council and the communications with the mayor's office and the staff.
So you're saying now that we're not supposed to be talking to any members of your staff?
I'm saying that to be able to make sure that there aren't confusion in communications. As you just mentioned, there are lots of hands working in many of our projects. It's always best to start with one. And for you guys, the mayor is the really the best source of information about city projects and who's managing what and what needs to be done. And I think that that is the case. I mean, all of you reach out to me all the time with questions and concerns, and I think that that should continue.
All right, I'm done.
Oh,
Thank you.
Alderman Chabot. Sorry.
Okay. I don't want to get too far off on a tangent here, but it is related. I was unaware that this was going to happen. The playground at the point was removed. From what I understand, we are now putting in 2 soccer fields down there. The playground has been removed, so needless to say, I've received numerous calls from constituents down in that area that there's no longer a park. Lou could have a playground. There's going to be a lot of kids there that are not playing soccer at the time. I know I'm down there frequently with my kids and my grandkids. The playground got a lot of use. I know it's old, probably not worth saving much longer, if at all. But I'm just wondering if there are any contingencies for another playground there. I discussed it with the rec commission also. They didn't seem to be aware that this was going to happen either, and they're not aware of any plans to replace it. Are there any plans to put a playground down at the point?
So this project that you're talking about related to the Kingston Point Park Improvement Project started almost 2 years ago. And so I'm sorry if the last Parks and Recreation Director didn't share this project. I know that I personally wrote the Kingston Point Improvement Project grant back in 2015. So I'm sorry that, Kevin didn't share details of the project or the fact that, we've had public meetings at Leaving the Waterfront and I think that you attended. But I do think that, with the playground in particular, it was past its life expectancy. It did not meet code. It also flooded every time we had a heavy rain and basically created a pond, which again is, was not safe to continue to use. And so if you look at the City of Kingston website or the press release that we put out, or I think that hopefully Lindsay shared with the rec commission, I think that she was going to bring it up at your meeting last week. But there are plans to have a new playground. It's located closer to the beach, closer to the pavilion, which is actually closer to where we think folks will actually want to be able to use it, closer to the parking. And so we are hopeful that we'll continue to, work toward doing that. But again, as part of the community dialogue, there was actually an interest in putting in a natural playground down at Kingston Point. That was actually something that came up in the community feedback. And so that's kind of what we're looking to do with that space. But again, I think that the Kingston Parks and Recreation Master Plan also indicates the need for a soccer field, in that location and in Kingston Point Park. And so that's what, we're designing and, about ready to go to construction for. Okay.
Now, I just want to back up. We did discuss this. It was as you said, it was a while ago. I don't remember the time frame. I was just kind of surprised that it happened quite as sudden as it did. I knew we had talked about it. Kevin did discuss it with everybody. That was a long range goal to put in a soccer field. I was just a little taken aback that I got a few calls that all of a sudden, and the playground was gone already. So, I wasn't quite sure what to tell everybody. So I wanted to see what the future plans were for a playground.
And just
Jeffrey Ventura Morel.
Just about the playground in particular, Steve, I just want to mention, At this point, we don't expect one to go in this season, but you'll see that we also haven't utilized all of the Recreation Trust Fund, and so we would expect that a playground project would be a 2021, spring of 2021 project. Yeah.
Okay. Jeffrey Morrell?
Yes, I had a question. Maybe I misheard you, but I just heard you say that Julie Noble is managing capital projects.
And has, as you guys know.
At the April Laws and Rules meeting, you said that Julie Noble was in fact not managing capital projects. When I asked you, you said that is just hearsay and you have not heard that from me, so it's not confirmed. So I just want to invite anybody listening to go watch that video. It's the April Laws and Rules meeting where that was said. My next question was about item number 4 on your communication, the skate park. It says here that this is for phase 1. How many phases are there and where is funding coming for those subsequent phases? Thank you.
The second phases or third or fourth, what we envision is that over time, additional park elements would be added. And right now, there isn't any plans or funding for any additional park elements, but as they're identified as community, members of our community work together to be able to fundraise and or write for grants, additional elements can be added. But this is something that, is clearly a need. For those of you that have used the Kingston Point Rail Trail, recently you'll see that there was actually skateboard enthusiasts that actually brought their own elements to the Kingston Point Rail Trail and placed them themselves without the city's approval. Or so there clearly is an interest for people to step up and help. And so we envision that will happen, and we're working with members of the skateboarding community to do the design. But it is going to be a project going forward.
Alderman Davis, and then Alderman Tollerman.
Alderman Davis here. Mayor, a couple questions. First, the soccer fields, as I just wrote them down. You said earlier, you said that, that's previously flooded where the old playground was. Is there any plans to raise this level so that the soccer field's not flooded?
Yes, so both the new parking lot that's going to be built as well as the soccer field are both going to be raised basically to the same height as that filled-in area across the street from the playground. You'll see there's a mound there that was done a long time ago. So it'll all be raised generally about that height. I want to say it's about 5.5, 6 feet above sea level. So we won't have any additional flooding, in that area anymore.
Okay, second question. So, additional question in regard to that. So, I have like four questions here. So, bear with me. So, the field across from the previous playground park, what is that being utilized for right now? Is that something nothing can be done on it?
Yeah, currently, we're leaving it as open space. We envision it being utilized in the future potentially for concerts, similar to concerts that Radio Kingston has done down on the site. It is basically was filled in with gravel. Grass has grown on top, and so the substrate is not really conducive for turning it into necessarily a playing field or any. But it is good for overflow parking because it is very stable and secure. And so if there is an ability to need that for large events that happen, whether it's the BMX National Championship or big concerts or events. But as of now, we don't have any plans to alter it or change it at this point, other than just adjacent to it is a trail that goes to what will be the Empire State Trail. So there'll be some pedestrian connections out to North Street from that area, but there's nothing in particular. We have no plans for that site currently.
Okay. Second question, Barnum, the 70,000 that you're requesting. So that's separate from the fence that we're gonna. Sorry, the fence that we're asking for.
Yeah, the 70,000 this 70 that's on the agenda is actually a grant from the Community Development Block Grant process about 2 years ago, I believe, to be able to put in a new playground structures and make improvements to Barman Park, and that is separate than the $45,000 to remove the old fence there and clear out the vegetation along that edge of the park.
Okay, next question. So I have two more. Back to the skate park. This is phase one. So we're just going to lay down cement, a slab that is not going to be any structures or whatever for them to skate at this time. Any ramps or anything in this first phase?
There'll be two. I think we'll be in our budget. We believe we're going to have the ability to add two park elements. Those haven't been chosen. Which two park elements? Whether it's a ramp system and a rail system, or a ramp system and a skate system, that we're still trying to work out with the skaters. What are kind of the two most important elements?
Okay, and then finally, the last question. And so, as mentioned in previous communication, when we came out with these requests, and again, I just want to state and be on the record that it appears that Block Park, which is downtown, and is not on these when we have park improvements. It seems like the last 2 years for these park improvements, Block Park has been passed by. So I just hope, as I stated again, that previous communication, that Block Park in the near future, and that is being looked at in regard to improving or adding equipment to that location. So this, and children down in that area will have a park in the plan. Right now, again, they have two basketball courts and a handball wall, and for the youth, and besides the softball field that is utilized by adults. So again, in the near future, if we can just start making sure we're looking at that park to add some new features or elements. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. And we recognize that. I think one of the biggest issues that has to happen in Block Park is some additional paving. As you know, I think it was 2015 or 2015. Back in my old job, I actually received grant money, and we were able to redo the entire basketball court system there. And we put in all new basketball courts. We also put in the new bathroom facility. And we also, it is one of the newest pavilions. I think the pavilion was built about 10 years ago through a community effort. And so we recognize, the needs of really trying to improve access to the site through some pavement work. And so we're going to continue to try to find funding to do that. It's a big project because there's a lot of pavement that would be needed, but that's definitely, it is on our the capital projects list.
And it's one final thing on that, because that old circle that, as a child, we used to just run around on, again, that's an area where you might be able to put a skateboard in for people down that area to be able to skateboard around that circle that's there. So this in the future. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Don Tolliman, followed by Rennie, followed by Andrea Shutt. Don?
Thanks. This is Don. I just want to say I think all these initiatives are awesome, and that everybody needs to be outside more. And the fact that our parks will have Wi-Fi and that we're upgrading the equipment is terrific. So I just want to acknowledge that we're doing this, especially that there's a fund for this. It's not new money. Just one question: the soccer field, as I understand it, is not going to be full-sized. We don't have a soccer field. This will be the only soccer field in our city. Did you consider making it full-size, maybe putting it, making the concert space where you were putting the park or the field now, and doing a larger area for the soccer field? And also, is AstroTurf a possibility? Because that would get a lot more life out of it.
Yeah, we've looked at turf. It is definitely beyond our budget. We've gotten quotes on what a kind of full-size soccer field with turf would cost. It's about $500,000 generally speaking, just for the turf component of the field. So we would love to someday, but when we were having conversations with the community about the needs for fields, most of the soccer organizations that play on full-size fields are quite content with using Deep Stadium. And there seems to be enough availability for, our soccer folks to use that for the full-size field. But what they identified was missing was actually the opportunity for younger fields, younger youth to play. Yes, you can split up a full-size field into 2 smaller fields or 3 smaller fields, but the sense is that really having one youth soccer field in Kingston will really help attract some of the youth soccer leagues back into Kingston. Almost all of them operate outside the city on fields in the town of Ulster. So we think that this could at least be a good start. And we do feel like because we have that other open space down at the beach, if we recognize a need for additional soccer fields, say a full-size field or any type of other recreation, that is kind of a blank slate that could be approached separately someday in the future. And we could go, and it could be a standalone project.
Okay, Rennie?
Michelle had
Randy?
a question before I did, so I'm happy for her to go before me.
Okay, let's go to Michelle Hershey. Sorry.
Hi, this is Alderwoman Hirsch. Thank you. I just want to state my support for improving our parks, but I'm just concerned about only leaving $30,000 in 30% left in the trust in case we have overages and leaving projects unfinished.
Sure. I think from our perspective, we are going to, at least for these projects, we're going to take the projects and make sure that we, have signed contracts with any contractors or with DPW staff to make sure that we can get them done. And if we end up having any cost overruns of, certain projects that we can't, get done, we would definitely come back to you guys to let you know that. We believe that these numbers are good. We think that this is an aggressive plan. With the amount of, work that's going to need to go into getting all of these projects done, it's going to take a team effort, but we're going to try. So we may end up putting, if we don't get through all the projects, it'll go back into the fund. But we are also, as we look at the horizon, almost really very little or no funding has really ever been spent out of the Recreation Trust Fund so far to date. And that's why it's grown to be such a large number. But we do think that, there are future housing plans for Kingston, and some are already proposed that we know about. Some haven't even been proposed yet that I'm sure will come over the next few years. And so we expect this fund to continue to grow and, we'll continue to, generate, kind of revenue for us in new areas.
Thank you.
Rennie?
One last question, Steve. So I'm a little concerned about Julie being stretched thin. She sounds like she's working in the rec department. She's working in DPW. To some degree, it seems like she's also working in the economics department. And she's also running 2 volunteer climate-related committees. So it seems like, at the very least, she's going to have to work a fair amount of overtime. If she works overtime on this particular project, who's going to be approving that overtime?
For all of the different projects that we have work on, we have budgets in each of the departments. And so if it is a public works related project, any overtime or comp time comes out of that. If it's a parks and recreation project, it comes out of that. As you guys know, we're trying to cut down on overtime costs. And so most of the departments are now, moving their employees to, comp time. And so again, for any projects that, do take place, either one of the department heads will, sign off on it for the staff. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Andrea? Andrea Shutt, please.
Hi, Andrea Shaw here. Yeah, when I was going back and forth with Julie a little bit about some of the parks maintenance, not necessarily the ones we're talking about right here. And it sounded like the impression, I think the confusion is happening because parks maintenance is now under DPW as of what, a month or 2 months ago. And it gave, her emails gave me the impression that parks and maintenance and anything related to it would be under Ed Norman's supervision. So that means any overtime or comp time would have to be approved by DPW. Is that correct?
That would be
If
my
it's related to parks. Okay. I have 4 questions. It's kind of, I think Michelle and I had the same thought process, so it's kind of off of what she was asking. So the first one about the prices, because I had the same concerns as Michelle about if these go over, because this is an ambitious list. I especially love the Wi-Fi. That's going to be a great addition. How were these prices estimated? I mean, is this something that comes out of the engineer's office or DPW, or how were these prices kind of come up with?
So Ed Norman and Ryan Kuhn at DPW provided insight, as well as, getting quotes from different departments, like the Wi-Fi, came from IT, and the most of the other actual construction costs all came from DPW.
Okay, thank you. And then you kind of answered this question a little bit. Most of this is in-kind work from DPW and Parks Maintenance, or is this also, you mentioned a little bit when Michelle asked the question about contractors. How much is this going to be in-kind work? Or is it too soon?
There'll be prep work that Public Works will do, but the roofing projects will most likely all get bid out. The playground equipment will get bid out. For the equipment, we may help with the install potentially, or at least the prep work. Same thing for the playground. We'll most likely contract out the playground equipment, but most likely, DPW will help do some of the, removing dead trees and things like that. IT may help with the Wi-Fi, but we need to buy them the equipment to install. And I think DPW would say, for instance, at Barman Park, they'll take down the fence, but they'll have to pay to have most likely a contractor come and put back up the fence. So it is, for all of these projects, DPW plays an important role in often prepping and preparing the projects, and then they, get the contracts and executed to actually kind of finish the job, if you will.
Okay. Yeah, and again, I said it, and I think others said it. This is an ambitious list. And when you and I talked on Friday, you mentioned that these all had to happen, or had to happen at the end of the year. Otherwise, the monies go back. Is that correct? And we had to do this all over again. So yes. That's correct, right? Okay. Yep. So is there some sort of, I guess because most of this will be contracted, I may have already answered my question, but we're already halfway through the year. Is there a prioritized list of how you're going to get some of this stuff done? Like, just in case we don't have time and we run out of months of the year? Are you going 1 through 7, or have that been talked about?
I'm at this point leaving it to, DPW and the project managers to, work to figure that part out. They've assured me that they believe that they can get this done, or at least they're going to try their best, foreseeing any, major hurdles. But they believe that this is an achievable list. And so I kind of have to take them at their word for that, and support them the best that I can. And in the end, they can't get it done. But I think that they've identified these as priority projects that would be good to get done in this kind of pandemic timeframe.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I think that's all my questions that I have. So thank you.
Okay, this is Doug Coop. I would say these are a whole series of great projects which will improve our parks, bringing them up to really some of the best in the region, maybe even in the state. It's great that the money is there for us to do this. Lots of unanswered questions, which you've all asked, and projects of this complexity, it's rather difficult to answer them all right down to the gnat's eye. So I'm in favor of this project. Does anyone care to make a motion on this? Alderman Scott Childers. Alderman Scott Childers?
Yeah, I made a motion.
Oh, okay, that's your motion. Okay. Is there a second?
I'm sorry, Doug, but John Tui's hand is up, so we might want to call on him.
I see. I'll come to him. Is there a second to the motion? Alderman Davis has made a second. So the motion's been made by Rennie Scott Childers and seconded by Alderman Davis.
But Doug,
John Tui, you have a John Tui?
Hey, Doug. I just want to let you know, a little while ago, I emailed you a revised committee report just to include the budgetary transfer that would be needed as part of this. So I just sent that a few minutes ago. So it would be
John, I'm the one who sets up the committee report, so can you send that to me if you haven't already?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I can email you the committee reports.
Okay, just because if it's all set up, then I'm the one who sends them to the committee members.
Okay.
So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Andrea, just to let you know, I sent Doug 3 earlier. The last email that I sent was a revision of one of those 3. I'll send you both emails. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Okay, the motion is on the floor. I'll ask for a vote. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Don, you're not on that. Okay, so it's we have a vote of 5 in favor, opposed, 0. Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's move to the second item on the agenda, which is a budget amendment for the shade tree account. This is a budgetary transfer of $600 involved repair to a vehicle as a result of collision with a tree. The repairs have been made. The city is being reimbursed, so it's just a question of credit to the revenue line
I motion.
and
I motion.
expenses.
I motion.
Motion by Alderman, Alderman Davis made a discussion. Thank you. Second, Alderman Shabbat. All in favor? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 5-0. Thank you. Next item is budget transfers for the projects at Barman Park. Funds from CDBG funds from 2018 and 2019, totaling $70,000. Julie, you want to speak to this?
Sure. Julie Noble, Sustainability Coordinator and Project Manager for the City of Kingston. The mayor did mention this before, but this is money that was allocated to the city in 2018 and 2019 through the CDBG fund. So in the amount of 2 separate grants, one was $50,000 and one was $20,000, respectively, to fund park improvements. Neither of those was expended by the previous parks director. And so the funding is still available through CDBG. And so this is a request, since it was not on the radar of that director, it wasn't in the budget. And so this is a request to increase the expense lines to $70,000 and increase the revenue lines to $70,000 in the parks line. So it would be a 0 financial impact. And the scope of this project, as was mentioned, is not to take down the entire playground. The playground actually was done with the community build through Kaboom several years ago. And it's actually in okay condition. It's just not, it could be a lot better. It could be larger for sure. And so this would be to supplement additional elements to that playground, as well as changing the surface that it is on. So the surface that it is on is not sufficient. And we're going to be moving towards a pour-in-place surface, which is the sort of rubberized surface that you don't have to maintain after the first time it's put in. And then additionally adding benches and picnic tables, which don't currently exist. There's no place for anyone to sit and be there with their families. So this is a zero financial impact transfer for those two projects.
And these are all unexpended funds from 2018 and 2019, correct?
Unexpended allotments from CDBG, yes.
Yes, yes. Alderman Scott.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, Julie, thank you for being here to explain this. I just want to clarify that these are funds that are dedicated to this kind of project, if not this specific project, right? So they're not things that we could use for other budget items.
Yeah, so in 2018 and 2019, the Parks Department applied through CDBG for these specific projects. These are grants that have already been allocated. The money is already dedicated to these projects. This is not an open $70,000 that we just want to do things with Barman Park. This is picking up on money grants that are sitting there for Barman Park that were just not budgeted into this year's budget.
Great. So it'll help us put some folks to work with money dedicated specific to that project. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Entertain a motion. Alderman Scott Childress. Motion and a second by Alderman Chavez. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-0. Thank you. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
And by the way, whose birthday is it?
My husband.
Who?
My husband.
Ah, okay.
Do we sing now or at the end of the meeting?
You can sing tomorrow.
All right.
Okay. Moving on to the repeal of the bond ordinance, an unused portion of the bond ordinance. John Toohey, would you speak to this, please?
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, just wanted to do some housekeeping. We had some projects that were done some time ago. Bond ordinances, they stay on the books for 10 years. So these bond ordinances that are in this communication were rather large. I thought it would be in the best interest of the city to repeal the unused portion. It's really just a matter of record keeping, but at least when we do our financial reports that get issued out, we don't have to list these as open lines of bonding that are available. So I would recommend, after consulting with our fiscal advisor, to repeal whatever is left on these two items. So, all told, the totals are in there. Both these projects, the Beale Street and Greenfield Avenue Bridge, were primarily grant funded. Just an example of some of these projects where we do the bond ordinances to appeal or to appease the state agencies that give us the grant funds by circling back and repealing some of these larger ones, probably helpful. So in this case, you're looking at over $7 million of bond ordinances that will be repealed. That's really all I have. It's Randy
Scott Childress.
Yeah, John. So what does this mean in terms of our books, basically? Is this is just totally housekeeping, or there's no money that's leaving our funds?
Complete housekeeping. It does nothing, just, once again, these are bond ordinances that were approved that weren't used.
Okay.
The one bond ordinance is one line. Reconstruction of Beale Street, we borrowed $200,000, and we have $3,760,000 of bonding that's available. We never used. Just removing the approval on it. It's repealing it, taking away a line of credit. It can't be used statutorily anyway, because we wouldn't have expenses to go against it. But it just looks better, for anyone to look at our books and say, okay, well, you have less bonding available. So, I think going forward, we'll try to revisit some of these larger projects that have bonding approved, particularly where you have these state grants or federal grants. And when there's large amounts that are unspent, we can go back and repeal them. So just to keep the record keeping up. So, please expect that you'll see this from time to time from me. And it truly is just a housekeeping thing that we have to go back and not that we have to. These would age out in 10 years anyway. But by doing this, it formally clears them off the books. Okay.
Other questions? I'll ask for a motion. Randy Scott Childress has had his hand up first, and second is Steve Chavez. All in favor? 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. We'll next move to the budget transfer for Parks and Recreation. That's the sixth item on the budget. $30,000 transfer of CDBG funds for work at the Rondout Neighborhood Center. Yes, Alderman Chavez. Alderman Chavez, you're muted, Steve.
I'm going to make a motion on that. I think we've discussed that in the past.
Yep, we have. Is there a second? All in favor? 1, 2, 3. Again, all in favor? 5-0. Thank you. Okay, next is the mayor is going to provide us with an update on the 2021 sales tax agreement.
As many of you are aware at this point, over the last 5 years, we've had an agreement with the county of Ulster related to our sales tax sharing. That agreement began in 2016 and will go until February of 2021. So 8 months or 6-7 months from now. That agreement lays out exactly the percentage of the total net sales tax that's collected that we receive, as well as the towns in Ulster County. We have began negotiations with the county executive with a new agreement. And as some of you that were around before know that it was very difficult and at times frustrating and sometimes testy negotiation with the county 5 years ago. And as you know how important sales tax is to the city of Kingston, any change in that 11.5% can cause drastic ramifications on our ability to deliver services and to take care of our residents. And so upon meeting with County Executive Ryan, we had a very fruitful and productive dialogue and came to tentative terms where both of us are in support of a 5-year sales tax agreement that leaves our 11.5% unchanged without any reductions to that number, and without some of the also complicated reductions that were in our most recent agreement. And so that's positive news. We don't have an official agreement penned yet, but it is something that we plan on working on over the next month or two. And so I believe that we will, you guys will be able to see that agreement soon, and we'll be able to get it signed well before the February 2021 expiration. Recently, there was a resolution that was brought to the Ways and Means Committee of the Ulster County Legislature by one of their representatives, hoping that instead of a long-term deal, that it was just a 1-year deal. Both my office, myself, and many of the mayors and supervisors in Ulster County from the Supervisors Association reached out to express their concern related to that. In the end, that legislation was pulled for not having enough sponsors in the legislature. And so I do want to thank our Kingston representatives for recognizing that a 5-year deal is really good as we're able to have, plan and to be able to be fiscally secure in that planning, especially at a time when we could, be still facing some very large deficits in, that area of sales tax that we used to, see lots of growth in. So that's my update. I'll continue to keep you all informed as we go through this process. But we really have just kind of kicked it off over the last couple of months. And but we do want to kind of get it wrapped up soon, I believe.
Question, Brandy?
Yeah, thank you, Steve, for pursuing this and for working to ensure that we have the longer term agreement rather than the 1-year agreement. That kind of knowledge, I think, goes a long way to helping us be able to plan. So I appreciate your work making that happen.
Thanks.
Alderman Chabot, questions?
Yeah. Yep. Well, not just a comment, just to follow up on Rennie. Yeah, we lived through that last one. It was very filled with anxiety and angst and all that kind of stuff. And without getting into too much of the nitty gritty, are there going to be any options to end the contract if somebody is not happy with it, or is it going to be kind of 5 years, 5 years? I don't want all the details, but I just want to.
Yeah, my sense is that the county executive and I both agree that a 5-year term is really the most beneficial for everybody.
Oh, whether anybody can opt out of this at some point.
At this point, we shouldn't go into any.
Kevin Bryant, please.
Kevin Bryant, Corporation Counsel. At this point, the discussion should end. You got the gist of the information relative to the contract. If you have specific questions, I can answer whatever specific questions you want in a attorney-client session or some other form. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's move on to the next item, which is the retirement incentive for the CSEA. Who will speak to this, Mr. Mayor or the Controller?
I can start, and then John can fill in if I missed anything. Okay. So John and I have been working collaboratively with CSEA over the last few weeks. I know if we think back to the plan that I initially presented to all of you related to kind of how we're going to be dealing with this economic situation that we found ourselves in, I believe as part of either phase 1 or phase 2 of our plan was the concept of a retirement incentive. And so we've worked collaboratively with CSEA to come up with a retirement incentive that we think could help move some employees who were considering retiring in the next few years to move up their retirement so that it can help us prevent, the type of drastic permanent layoffs that we could end up seeing due to the economic crisis that's, unfolding here. So with this agreement, if it's ratified by the Common Council, it would allow CSEA members to provide us notice by August 1st of 2020 that they plan to retire. And then they would have to depart service, so they'd have to retire sometime between August 1st and December 31st of 2020. If they chose to do that, we would, and the incentive piece of this is that we would provide them with dental and vision coverage as a retiree. Currently, dental and vision is provided to retirees. Our employees receive dental and vision currently, and it's a self-funded plan, meaning that we pay for the services that are actually used. And it is something that does have a cost, but we do believe that the cost is manageable for us in the long term. and that this would help us, reduce some members of our workforce, both hopefully this year as well as going into the 2021 budget. And if we get enough employees to participate in that, it could help, at bay any permanent layoffs that we may need to take. And so we're hopeful, but again, we do recognize that, by offering dental and vision, it is not, a huge, incentive, but it is something that we think is can be enough to get employees who potentially could be facing layoffs to potentially take the incentive. And it would be good for both individuals as well as family, kind of retirees. And so, John, did I miss anything, or is there anything that you want to add to that?
You're muted, John.
Sorry about that. I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, we have to strike a balance with the financial situation that we're in. We have to come up with an incentive that may be enough to get some employees to retire slightly earlier than they otherwise would have, with the understanding that, with this critical financial juncture that we're in, it's not really the time where we'd be able to come up with cash payouts and maybe more lucrative incentives. So, the cost of the dental insurance is, the dental and optical is currently about $900 a year. There are incentives on the employee side, the retiree side. They get certain discounts with the dental through their providers that with having this insurance they may not otherwise get. So there's additional incentive other than just the straight cost of the insurance. But once again, it's a deferred cost over a number of years, an amortized cost for the city. It works a little bit better in the current financial parameter that we're in right now, rather than just a straight out cash payment. So we were able to work this out. We're pleased with that with the CSEA. We're optimistic that we'll get a number of employees to take this. In terms of numbers, we don't know, but, hopefully if you have employees who are within a 12-month to 18-month window considering retirement, we may incentivize some to give us notice. And at least for, this year, we'll have some budgetary savings. And then for the following year, for 2021, because the notice is August 1st, we'll have an idea for the 2021 budget of what we're looking at. And as the mayor said, it could help our phase 3 situation.
Alderman Davis? Tony Davis?
Alderman Davis here. 2 questions, the mayor or John. One, when you're in negotiations with the union, was this brought up and to come up with this incentive? Was a discussion with them that incentive to throw that here in these negotiations?
I don't know. I think that, we started the conversations with CSEA over this, and I think the idea of dental and vision, was first proposed by us, but I do believe it is something that, they had also thought about, in other contract negotiations, I think in previous years about dental and vision for retirees. And so I don't think it's a new concept, but it is, we did pitch this concept to CSEA.
And the last question, this would only pertain to people who are retiring if they take this incentive. This would not affect current retirees?
Correct. Just for those that are participating in this incentive.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a one-shot deal, and it's it's a one-time deal, and it would not set a precedent, and that's clear in the MOA.
Alderwoman Hirsch, Chair. I have just a question regarding the self-funded. If the city at some time in the future were to move over to a fully funded plan, will these retirees that have taking this incentive, still be able to access the fully unfunded plan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? Ready?
Ray Scott Childress here. Yes, John or Steve. So do you have a rough estimate of cost per person for this per year? So we can get a sense of, somebody retiring now at 55, folks are living to be 80s and so forth. So we'd like to have a little sense of what kind of money we're talking about here.
Rennie, if I can answer that, the cost is approximately $900 per year for the insurance. We have a wide range of eligible retirees because of there's a large gap in their age because there's a year of service requirement. So they're essentially from 55 up. But if you can imagine the average retiree, you're looking at a 10 to 15 year time frame, and you multiply it out by $900. Obviously, there's going to be some appreciation of value, but it's if you net present value that back, it's not a considerable sum. But once again, there's value to the retiree. It's dental, it's vision. There's insurance discounts with the dental.
Right, but we're still talking. So if we just say roughly, given the numbers you gave me, 12,000 per person. When we know that this is not exact, and then we've got 10 people who take it. That's 120,000 something. So that's what we're looking at over 15 years or so.
Yeah, correct. Just to give an idea, if I can. At the time of the last recession, the city's retirement incentive at that time was a $10,000 cash payout.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just for comparison purposes,
right? So it's roughly equivalent, but it would be in a sense amortized over a long period of time.
Yeah, I think for the city right now, this is a more favorable option. Due to the amortized cost, and if you were to incentivize through cash, obviously you would have a current cash payout, which if cash flow becomes a problem later in the year, that would be an issue.
Okay, other questions? Yes, Andrea Schott.
Hi, thank you. It's Andrea Schott here. So they have to put this in August 1st. How soon will you be able to determine if we're going to be doing permanent layoffs from that date? Or is that too soon or too far away to really know that answer?
I think from my perspective anyway, we're continuing to kind of track, the numbers of, how these sales tax checks are coming in. I think we will have a better sense, by August, really what the fall would look like. I think the fall is going to be kind of the hardest time for us. I think that if we're able to, start to gain some of those, if that 30% reduction in sales tax number ends up being, 10% by August, it may be a little bit more manageable for us to be able to squeak through this. But I think that, come the end of the summer and early September, we may have to make some of those hard decisions jointly. We're going to have to look at the fund balance, and we're going to have to decide, as John will show later in his financial update, the different options of, the low estimate, mid estimate, or, high loss estimate. If we have those that exist, it shows how much is actually going to be left of the fund balance. If we do nothing else and we have no other permanent layoffs, there could be 10% left in the fund balance, there could be 5%, or there could be less than 5%. And I think that those are all the decisions that we'll have to make, jointly, I would think by later this summer, because by then we'll really know what some of our other losses are going to be too. And John is constantly working on that and kind of continuing to keep you guys updated and me updated and trying to constantly revise the revenue forecasts, as we move through this.
Okay, thank you.
Jeffrey?
Yes, do you know how many people have signed on to this or are expected to take this incentive?
So this is the first time it's been publicly discussed. Even so far, employees haven't been notified of it yet, at least not officially. So not until it passes the council, in July. That's when the offer will become official to employees to be able to. So they'll have basically from whatever your July council meeting is until August 1st to officially decide. After tonight, everyone's going to know about this, so we expect that. Employees are starting to think for themselves. They're probably starting to look at their numbers that they have. There are probably some calls to the retirement system. And so I would expect that over the next, month or so, we may start to get wind of how many people. I think if you're asking generally how many employees do we have that are over the age of 55, that are in CSCA, that have at least 10 years of service credit, there are about 36 employees that fall into that. That are over 55 that have 10 years of credit, which are the minimum standards. From there, it could be anywhere from 5 people to all 36. We doubt it'll be all 36, but we'll start to probably hear wind of folks coming over the next, month or so.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions, anyone? Entertain a motion, please. Alderman Scott Childress, is there a second? Is there a second? Steve Shabbat. Okay. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, hold them up again. Hold them up again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thanks, and happy birthday tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we'll next move to the controller's update, the monthly update, and then thereafter we'll go into executive session.
Thank you, Doug. So I gave everyone the financial update for the COVID-19. I think that's the most pertinent document to go over tonight. Just a little while ago, I sent you the standard monthly reports. As the mayor had mentioned, and the members of the Common Council who are meeting with me on a regular basis are aware, the last sales tax check was down 30.94%. Cumulatively, the last 3 sales tax checks were down 28.92, 37.87, 30.94. We're trying to build a trend here. Clearly, it's appearing to be over 30%. I'm working that into our financial models that estimate sales tax losses between $2.2 and $3.2 million. In the short term, we're down that 30% mark. There's approximately a 2-month waiting period between the sales tax period and when we actually see the money. So we're always going to be a little behind with the sales tax. So when we come out, when we open up this month, we're not going to see these numbers until sometime in August at the earliest. Okay. So we're always going to be playing a little bit of catch up. That said, my current range of sales tax estimates for the year are from this point forward somewhere between 21% down and 31% down over the remainder of the year. And I say 21 to 31%, that's year over year sales tax receipts. I do believe that, in the short term, we're going to see similar numbers at 30% for the next month or so. Later this summer and into the fall, I think we will see some improvement in the sales tax. What's yet to be seen is how much improvement. If the remaining sales tax receipts are in the neighborhood of 25-26% down over the remainder of the year, so we hovered at 31% for a while, then it trickles down to where we're like 21% towards the end of the year, we'll be at that mid-range loss estimate. So I think it's pretty safe to say we're going to at least be at the low loss estimate for sales tax. And that's that $2.2 million number. That's a 21% down for the remainder of the year. I'm pretty confident that the next few sales tax checks are going to continue to be down significantly. But even with improvement, it's hard to envision a scenario where we won't be down 22% or 21% for the remainder of the year in total. So I'll continue to update these sales tax numbers, but it will get a little more finite as we get through the year. But certainly, we should expect at least that $2 million loss to sales tax, if not higher. The last 3 checks cumulatively were down over $600,000 just in 3 checks. Okay, just to kind of give you an idea of what that 2.2 looks like. On a year-to-date basis, we're down $417,000 year over year. That's our actual realized loss as of right now. So that low loss estimate for sales tax of the 2.2, we've captured $417,000 of that already. Does that make sense to everyone? Right. So we're projecting the difference there. We're already 417 down, or almost 418,000 down. The rest of the updates, I've tweaked some numbers from the last update. The New York State revenue sharing, we still don't have word from the state. We believe that they're waiting, obviously, on the federal, what's going to happen at the federal level before we get word of our cuts. That hopefully happens soon, but we're in a waiting period right now. We would expect that we're going to receive at least 20% cut. That's what we're hearing from our state law or lobbying groups. But that's to be determined. And that, the mayor is talking about, at what point do you hit layoffs? At what point do you consider that? The New York State revenue sharing cut could be a big tipping point in that whole conversation, depending on how severe that number is. If it's on the lighter side, what we're expecting to 20%, that's $460,000. If it turns into a more draconian reduction, that could accelerate that conversation. Okay, just so everyone understands that. In terms of the other items, I've just adjusted based on what we're seeing year to date, the property tax, investment interest. The parking revenues, I've made a significant adjustment to since the last conversation. It's my understanding we're looking at paid parking, probably not happening this summer. So, the high loss estimate is essentially if paid parking doesn't come back at all this year. And the low loss estimate is locked if there's some increase or some reestablishment of paid parking in the fall. But if paid parking doesn't start up until after Columbus Day, you're looking at close to a $700,000 revenue loss. So all told, revenue losses, current projections are between $4 and $6.5 million. That would bring the fund balance down to somewhere in the 5 to 10% range, depending on where we fall in these loss estimates. And it's I've kind of moved the chairs around on the Titanic a little bit since the last time, but when I look at the bottom line numbers, if you compare the percentages, the fund balance percentages to the last update, they're pretty similar. It seems like I keep coming around at the 5% of fund balance for the high loss estimate. The low loss estimate, we're in that 10 to 11% range. What would drive these numbers further is, if we have positive budgetary performance that we've had the last few years, that would be extremely helpful in this situation. Could make a big difference. And there's some other notes on the bottom. It doesn't include any settlements of collective bargaining contracts as well. So if we settle any contracts, there's two outstanding contracts right now. If they're settled, they can reduce these numbers further. So it's just going to be a continual update. Jeffrey, you had a question?
Yeah, not necessarily related to what you just said, but it triggered something that's been in my mind. there are a lot of new expenses that we're incurring, and we're constantly being told, oh, it's not really an expense because it's already budgeted for. If something is budgeted for, but we don't spend it, that's a saving, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Sure.
Rennie?
Thanks. So, John, we still have a major employment contract hanging out there with the Policemen's Benevolent Association.
Right.
If that comes through in the next couple of weeks, couple of months, what does that do to all these numbers?
Well, that would be a further reduction in these numbers. Once again, I mean, you have contingency, which could cover some of that, but the prior year would be expected to come from fund balance. So to the extent that, at this point, the PBA contract is current through 2016. So the 17, 18, 19 portion of any settlement would be expected to come from fund balance. So, that would be another draw on fund balance. And once again, that's where a positive budgetary performance this year would be helpful to mitigate any such hit to fund balance from the settlement of a contract. Looks like Michelle has a question.
Michelle?
Yes, Alderwoman Hirsch here. Thank you for all this information, John. I'm just curious what the benchmark is for returning to paid parking. How is that decision being made and what's it based upon?
At this point, the mayor's making those decisions and informing me. I do think that, a big factor in his decision making is being supportive of local business and, weighing obviously there's a short-term budgetary hit of not having paid parking in, but then weighing that against which is perhaps the larger factor, is supporting local business, keeping them economically stable, for the betterment for those businesses, for the betterment of our city. Certainly the concern would be as these businesses are trying to reopen and establishing paid parking and parking tickets and things of the like, you certainly wouldn't. I think the consideration is trying not to create a disincentive or any impediment to their successful reopening. So I think the mayor's trying to be as supportive as he can as a local business. And there's obviously just a concern with starting paid parking too soon. And once again, I mean, the other part is, paid parking was originally implemented as a way to keep vehicles a turn of a local business. So to the extent that that's not a problem, when these businesses reopen, that has to be a consideration, I would think, for whether it's for the mayor or for the common council.
Right. I'm not advocating to go back to paid parking. I just was looking for clarification, but thank you.
Andrea Schott?
I'm just going to piggyback on Michelle again. Sorry, Michelle. With the monies that came in parking, that's always, or at least the last few years, been the participatory budget monies, right? So, yeah. So that's something to be probably going to be considered in the next budget, right? Is if we are able to do the participatory budget, is that correct to assume?
Well, those for 2020, those monies were removed from the budget as part of the financial response, which was passed by the Common Council, the mayor's COVID financial plan. When you pass those long budgetary transfers, that removed any funding for the participatory budgeting in anticipation that there were going to be large and substantial shortfalls to the parking revenue. I think it's way too early to look at 2021. Certainly there's going to be very significant budgetary challenges ahead of us that, sure the mayor will take into consideration when determining whether or not we can fund participatory budgeting in the future, at least for next year. But that's
kind of
to be determined.
It brings me to the next question. I may just be asking questions that don't have answers to tonight, but normally this time of year you start working on the 2021 budget. Is this going to be kind of pushed back a little bit because of trying to just get through this year, or are you already starting conversations on 2021?
Well, typically the budget's a year-long conversation, but typically the budgetary request would go out about a month from now. I'd anticipate that the time frame will be somewhat similar. There's a lot more moving pieces this year that would certainly, I think we need to look at whatever we can do on a budget earlier, but with as many variables that we have on a revenue side, it's going to be really hard to wrap up a budget earlier. Certainly, depending on where we're at with phase 3, that could completely alter departmental budgets. So I would think that we're going to be in somewhat similar time frame with the budget. We could potentially be a little bit earlier, just to give us more time to look at the numbers. But I generally have a pretty good understanding of where we're going to be. So by the time we start putting out those requests.
Tony Davis, please.
Alderman Tony Davis here again. So, and John, to reiterate Jeffrey's question earlier, and so because money's in the budget doesn't mean it has to be utilized, correct?
No, I mean, every year that we have budgetary savings from items in the budget that aren't spent, that end up going back into fund balance. So that's part of our positive budgetary performance each year is spending less than what's been budgeted for, or a combination of that and revenues exceeding what we're budgeted for. Quite frankly, it's going to be a little more challenging this year, only in that we've already, we've made the 15% cuts to departmental budgets. So, we're working with a smaller window here, but internally we're trying to watch as much as we can. I mean, to the extent that things cross my desk, I'm asking questions and trying to get answers back to the departments. But I do get the sense that a lot of the departments understand the severity of what we're in.
Rennie?
Don, I know you might not be able to answer this, but I'm just trying to get a feel. Do you think it's inevitable that we're going to have to permanently furlough some of our city employees, or is that totally dependent on the number of folks who take the buyout that we just approved tonight? Any inkling along those lines?
It's a loaded question. I'm confident that we are going to have losses that are substantial. In terms of a permanent layoff, ultimately it's the mayor's call. It'll be the common council's call how to deal with that. Best case, we're looking at a low loss estimate, right? How does the mayor and how does the common council want to handle that? Certainly it seems that we're trending towards a phase 3. But once again, it's, there's decisions, how low are you willing to let the fund balance go? I have concerns about the fund balance being depleted, quite frankly. I know the mayor's expressed a plan that will utilize some fund balance. I've expressed to the mayor and I'll express to the common council, if you let the fund balance get to the point where you're at the high loss estimate, I have concerns about our availability, access to capital, things like that. So I do think as you trend towards that middle to high loss estimate, the phase 3 of the mayor's plan becomes, a very real possibility. And quite frankly, even at the low loss estimate, it's probably a real possibility.
So if the PBA contract is signed relatively soon, do we pay that out all at once, or is that paid out over a period of time?
Generally, it's a lump sum. Generally, you have a period of time, a short window of time to pay the retro, which would be 17, 18, 19, and then you readjust the current salaries to the new salary schedule, and then you pay out, prospectively that number. But yeah, the settlement of a contract that's 3.5 years outdated is going to have would have a substantial retro payment, more than likely.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Michelle, followed by Tony.
Alderwoman Hirsch here. John, I'm just curious if we're tracking, overtime and what that looks like compared to a year ago. Are we down?
Yeah, I sent out, give me 1 second here. We're through April, we're 24.4% expended. So at 33.33% of the year, we're 24.4% expended, which is generally pretty good. We're 33%, once again, you're 33% through the year, but you haven't done 33% of the overtime yet. I don't have year over year. I'm not looking at it that way. I would tend to think that in general, overtime, we're favorable. I don't think the expending in year over year is going to be the issue. Certainly, we're trying to control the expenditures to the extent we can. I don't think you're going to see large variances of where a certain item is higher than it was last year. The issue is going to be is that you have a $4 to $6.5 million revenue loss, and against expenditures that, even if they're down, it's just not going to be enough to offset that huge revenue loss. And those are the decisions that the mayor and the common council have to decide. How do you deflect that revenue loss? Do you further reduce expenditures through the phase 3? Or to what extent do you soften out with fund balance? And, ultimately those are the decisions to wrestle with. The mayor's trying to take all the information in. I know the council is. You don't want to overreact. We're trying to continue to gather data on sales tax because we've only had 3 checks at this point on the sales tax since the COVID period started. We could be surprised the next sales tax check could be a lot greater or, much different than the prior checks. I don't think that's going to be the case. I tend to think that we're going to be hovering at 31% mark for a while. But, just trying to gather data, for as long as we can before making more draconian decisions.
Right, I just want to make sure that we're not depleting the fund balance with overtime, and then it would lead to, more people possibly losing their jobs. So.
And I understand, that question. Overtime year over year in general is not an issue for citywide. I mean, I've seen even the fire department has been expending a ridiculously low number of overtime. I don't think I've ever seen such small overtime coming out of that department. So in total, the overtime has been pretty stable. I mean, I would have to check last year, but I would imagine that we had been over 24% last year. But that's Michelle. That's in total. That's not department by department.
Okay.
All right.
I just want to make sure that we're keeping track of that and we're aware of that.
And if you ever had a question on a particular department, you can always ask, and I can get that information for you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Tony Davis.
Tony Davis here. And so earlier today, I sent out a communication to all the aldermen, the mayor. John, I forgot to put you on there. And then, John, as you're stating here with our city's finances, and dire needs right now, and you being an expert on it, and it seems that you're saying that we're going to be in the middle to the higher end of a deficit. On top of that, with city employees being furloughed and not knowing, and it looking like we might have to go into phase 3 or phase 4, where we might have to lay off some more. And I just don't see, at this time, there's been discussions, and I guess, of opening up the beach, which is going to create some more money out of the budget. And if that's going to substantially hurt our bottom line as it is right now, John?
The beach, well, of course, it's an additional cost. I don't think at this point, substantial is a pretty big number. I mean, we're dealing with pretty substantial losses already. The beach overtime, or, the seasonal pay there is not significant. Obviously, it's a consideration for the mayor, for the common council. The mayor's aware of what the cost is to open the beach. I think he's looking at it from a quality of life standpoint and giving the residents somewhere to go and something to do. Understanding what the cost is. That's the backdrop of all these decisions. Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you know what is the cost
Of opening the beach?
Yes.
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but it's
the budget for the lifeguards and employees on the beach is around $63,000, if I remember.
Well,
and there's probably going to be a few costs above that. The mayor noted, though, that if we don't hire lifeguards, that we might end up having to spend money for Kingston Police to respond, to come in and handle things like appropriate distancing and so forth. So that might to some degree offset any savings we would have from canceling the opening of the beach and paying lifeguards.
So where have we been seeing, has the police responded to any calls and any gatherings so far in the city in regard to social distancing? And if so, had they enforced anything in regard to social distancing? And from the police departments I've heard around and I've read and listened to anything, that is not what they're going out and giving people tickets or arresting people for not following social distancing.
I'm not justifying, just passing on.
Right, and now this is Andrea Schott. Right now, or if this is open, you put the onus on the young people, the lifeguards, typically teenagers, to then enforce all of this. And John made a point, and this isn't anything directed towards John, but just make a note to everybody that, the opening of the beach is, John said, is a decision with the council. We have not been brought up to speed on this. Tony hadn't reached out with his email, we wouldn't know. So hopefully we could find out more information on this and the cost, because yeah, you're right, it's probably a small number, but there are a lot of small numbers add up to big numbers. And when you're in a crisis, I think that's the stuff that we need to be looking at, and that's the council's responsibility. So hopefully we can continue these conversations and get more answers.
Jeffrey, did you have a question? No, I'm sorry. Okay. Any other comments, questions for John? Okay, we've completed the old
Yeah, one more,
new business. Yes, Michelle.
Alderwoman
Michelle?
Hirsch, Alderwoman Hirsch here. I just wanted to thank John for all his work. I know this is a very trying time, and thank you for everything you're doing.
thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Complete the new business part of the agenda, except for one item, and that is a discussion of tax proceedings. Now, these involve active actions, or actions that are active in the Ulster County Supreme Court. So to discuss these, we'll need to go into executive session. So I would entertain a motion to do so.
Doug, before you take the motion, Dan Baker is here, the attorney from his office, Kyle Barnett, and we just need to explain why we're going into executive session. So I think he's probably ready to do that, and then we can take the vote.
Sure. These, as Doug said, these are current actions in Ulster County Supreme Court filed against the city of Kingston. And my counsel and I are here tonight to discuss what's happening inside these proceedings, and respectfully request that we go into executive session with obviously my counsel, John Toohey, Kevin Bryant, Kyle Barnett, and the rest of the common council.
Okay. Is there a motion to go into executive session? Randy Scott Childress, the second. Tony Davis, all in favor? 1, 2, 3. Tony, do you have a vote? Tony, you voting for or against?
If I second it, that means that I'm in favor of it.
Okay. All right, 5-0. Okay, thank you. Andrew, you want to give the instructions to
Sure.
regarding
So
the
what I'm gonna,
conference call and the access number? Does everyone have the number for the conference call? Everyone, show of hands for Steve. You have it?
Andrew, it was the one you provided to me most recently? Okay.
yes, yeah.
And the,
Yeah,
and the
I don't
access.
have a text. The only one who I didn't text this, I don't have his number, but I'm assuming Dan has shared that. So if you could enter in, before you do, just mute yourself on the screen and turn your camera off, because we're going to keep the meeting running.
So, Andrea, let's dial that number and put the access code in.
Yes. Yeah, and just give me a second to get in there, because we do have a 15-second delay on things. So I'll be there in a minute, and then just make sure your camera's off, you're muted, and then once we get in there, we'll just go through roll call real quickly to make sure we're all in there. So I will talk to you in a second, and for the listeners, we'll be back after tune.
So cameras and mics off.
That's correct. Yep.
Cameras and mics off.
This is such a weird world.
So let's see, are we all here? Michelle, Tony, Steve, Rennie, and Doug, and Andrea's here, and John is here, and Dan. Okay. I don't have the committee reports. Can somebody?
Sure, I can read it for you. So, department assessment, date 6/10/2020, description is a budget transfer in the amount of $20,000 from account 1930.467 certiorari actions to account 1355.411 consultants. Estimated financial impact 0. Signature Daniel Baker.
Is there a motion? Rennie Scott Childress, motion. Second, Michelle Hirsch. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 5-0. Thank you.
Next,
Moving on.
next report from the Department of Assessment. Date 6/10/2020. It's an authorization of settlement. McNaughton and DePola LLC versus the City of Kingston concerning section block and lot 56.33-1-14.11. Reduce 2019 assessed value from $3,399,000 to $2,450,000. Reduce 2020 assessed value from $3,399,000 to $2,450,000. Estimated financial impact is $0. $0 repayments from the city to the complainant. Signature Daniel Baker.
Motion, Rennie. Second is Steve Shabbat. All in favor? Tony, you voting? Okay, 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Dan. Okay, well, thank you. Dan, can I just ask one question? 21 budget we'll be working on rather shortly. Can I assume you're going to be looking for a lot more money next year?
I do think the council is going to have to strongly consider all the factors that are going to be involved in defending tax surcharges moving forward. I do think we're going to have to sit down, further discuss it, see what happens in the near future, if there's any that are resolved, and do, I think, maybe more appropriate and smarter planning on moving forward and how to resolve these and try to save the money, save the city more money. Sometimes when we hold back a little bit, it may cost us in the future.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Any other questions, comments? I'll accept a motion to adjourn. Ready? Second, Michelle? All in favor? Opposed? 4-0 to adjourn. Tony,
All
your
right.
vote to adjourn? He votes 5-0. Okay. Angie, I want to thank you for making all the arrangements to go
Yes.
in and out of executive session.
No
Not
problem.
so easily
Thanks,
done, I
Andrea.
think. But
Good night.
thank you.
Night.
Okay.